Okay, I'm going to call our committee of the whole meeting to order. We have everyone present except Alder Pash and Alder Schmid. So I'm going to turn it over in just a couple of minutes here to the gentleman from Cedar Corporation. But I just want to kind of give you a little level set first. So as you all know, we've been working on housing for a couple of years. It's the need for it is well documented in our comprehensive plan. It's obviously a really critical component of economic development and something that we have been focusing on, but through the help of the Health Foundation funding the work that Cedar Corp will do, we're able to have some really good analysis completed, some plans created, and some sites really well prepared. So what you'll hear tonight is, it sounds like the building blocks of workforce housing. And we'll be able to, you guys can answer some questions or ask questions if you have any at the end. I did say this is normally a tour presentation that up until about 8 hours ago, they thought they had an hour and a half for, and then Alex was the bearer of bad news that it's more like 55 minutes because we have to start council right at 7. So with that, I will turn it over to you guys and we'll take it from there. Or Tina, perfect.
So I'm Tina with the Greater Watertown Community Health Foundation, and we're just here and pleased to partner with Cedar Corp and to provide the funding for both the City of Watertown and the City of Jefferson to dive deep and really put a proactive plan together in terms of growing workforce housing because there is such a shortage. And so thank you for being here, and with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Seth Hudson and Eric Fall from Cedar Corp. Thank you.
What are you doing, Paige? And good evening, Seth Hudson with Cedar Corporation. How are you? Thanks for having us tonight. This is Eric. He'll be talking a little bit later. And usually we have Dave Porterfield with us with Moving Out, but he couldn't make it tonight. So I'm going to cover a little bit of his slides as well. So just really quick, little 2-second spiel on who Cedar is. We're an integrated service company, planning, engineering, economic development, et cetera. Those are our services. Headquartered in Menominee. We got offices in Green Bay, Cedarburg, and Madison. We work for about 90 communities as their extended staff. We also have a development arm that I lead, so we actually do developments ourselves. We partner with Moving Out on housing projects, and we do other projects as well. So, and then Moving Out, if Dave was here, they're a nonprofit entity, and they're in partnership with people with disabilities and their allies to create sustainable communities. As a nonprofit, that's their focus, and they've done a number of projects across the state that falls under that affordable housing area for veterans and seniors with disabilities for portions of the projects, and then the rest of it is just affordable housing depending on the marketplace. And they are one of the state's experts in the low-income housing tax credit program, which we'll talk about in a little while. So really quick tonight, we want to cover what is workforce housing, some of the factors impacting the national housing market, talk a little bit about what communities are doing to facilitate workforce housing. We'll dive not too deep tonight on financing tools that could be used and some examples of projects. And then then we're going to go where are we starting from, and that's where Eric will come up and talk a little bit about housing studies that have been done, your comprehensive plan, and things of that nature. And then we'll give you kind of what our next steps are. This is the first night of what will be 3 meetings over the next month, month and a half. So what is workforce housing? There are a couple different definitions out there, and I'm going to step back and say tonight you're going to see some numbers that'll come up. They might not be exactly the same from slide to slide because the sources are a little different, and one of the wonderful things about our federal government is no sources are the same. So don't worry too much about the numbers being off by 1,000 or whatever, but just the general gist of where we're going. So drives me nuts. My background's economics, and I just can't stand it when they don't add up right. So, all right, workforce housing. So the Wisconsin Realtors Association defines workforce housing as the supply of housing in a community, different types, sizes, locations, that meets the needs of the workforce in that community. That's a very easy definition of workforce housing, right? Pretty straightforward. The Urban Land Institute defines it as housing that is affordable to households earning between 60 to 120% of the area median income. That 60 to 120 will come in again later. That's important. Affordable housing is considered 60% or lower. So that workforce is that in between between that and market rate. And then the most popular one is through HUD at the federal level that defines affordable housing as a dwelling as one that a household can obtain for 30% or less of its gross income. And just to point out what that means when we talk about that 30% or less of its gross income, that's covering your housing costs. So if you're a homeowner, that includes your mortgage, second mortgage, back when you can have second mortgages, your taxes, your home insurance, any condo fees if you're in a condo or mobile home costs, your electricity, your gas, water, sewer, and other things. Cable does not fall in that. But if you stop and think about your own budget, a lot of us are over that due to where the housing crisis is today. And then if you're obviously renting, it's your rent and then any utilities you might have to pay that's not covered by your rent or any of those types of fees. And then I should always add, of course, we're in Wisconsin, so then, you got plowing and all that other fun stuff too, So where we stand, so median income in various Wisconsin counties, Jefferson County is up there and so is Dodge. And the feds, in this case, this is WHEDA, Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Agency. You can see up there the median income for one family, one person, 2, 3, or 4 people in a household. We don't really get into, are all 4 people working? Maybe 3 are working, maybe just 2 are working, but it's just they look at how many people are in a household and what that income is. It's part of the census. So if you look at annual income limits in Jefferson and Dodge counties by those percentages of the number I just showed you before, 30% to 60%, there's your 4 people average, and then 80, 100, 120, again, to show you the difference. So again, it's just to kind of start setting the bookmarks of what we're talking about when we talk about affordable between the 30 and 60%, and then workforce between the 60 and 120. So what does that mean for Watertown? We pull data from a database called Tremor, which is pulling it from the Fed reserve banks. And so this is 2021 quarter 2, the most recent quarter. These are average wages within the city of Watertown by their NAICS code. So if you're manufacturing, the feds say that your average annual wage is about $62,513. Again, this is average across the manufacturing industry. And as you go down, and then what your average monthly wages would be as well. So if you take a look at, for example, let's see what we have in here. Educational services is the 5th one down. Your average wage is about $45,843. If you go back to this, you're just below the 60%, which means you fall under that affordable housing area in terms of home. So, and then we also have affordable rents. Again, this is using that 30%. So if you're in that, I'll go back one more again. I'm just going to show you again. Educational services, and this is not just mean just all teachers, but people in that field, of the average of 45,843. Oops, sorry. 45,843. That's the 3,820. That's right around that 60%. And they should only be spending about $1,182 on their towards their income, towards their rent, or their mortgage for their house. That kind of makes sense? Okay. So we're just kind of showing that, and I think Eric made a comment too. We're showing that, and you can kind of go back and forth, and we have handouts for you as well. But the point of that is to kind of take a look at it and think about individuals in your community, the types of jobs they're in, and see where they fall within that range. The point of that is a lot of folks think when you say affordable housing, you're thinking the very, very bottom, somebody working at a Quick Trip, somebody who doesn't have any education or whatever, and that's not the case. And that's becoming more and more not the case as we go deeper and deeper into the housing crisis, as housing prices are going up and they're not keeping up with wages.
Just wanted to add here quickly to put things in perspective. We didn't put a slide in here, but drawing off a previous study the city had. Back in the 2015 to 2019 census 5-year period, the most recent numbers, which are a little bit dated already, showed that about 65% of the renters within the city of Watertown had rents somewhere between $500 and $999. My guess is that has increased probably some degree with the crunch that we've seen over just the last 2 years. But even at that time, that represented 36% of those renters were at 30% or more in terms of their total housing costs. So almost 40% of the community in 2019 were feeling a pinch back then. What that number is today, I'm assuming it's a bit higher. How much, it's hard to tell. That's all set. Good.
So going into some of the just national, state housing market factors, I'm sure you've heard some of this stuff, but we'll just kind of cover it real quick. You know, there's been a major shift in the markets, housing markets composition. You know, we've had a record short of existing available homes. Historically, new homes made up about of every 1 in 10 available homes. Today, it's 1 in 4. That's the highest share ever. And also, 1 in 7 homes are now bought by Wall Street investors. Last night, while coming back from a night meeting, I was listening to a podcast about Zillow, and I can't remember the other one, Red something or other, how they've bought, Zillow alone has bought over 20,000 homes across the country. And what they're doing is I'm going to sell my house, I need to buy a house, so Zillow will buy my house for me. That way I don't have to worry about selling before I buy the next one. Well, they bought all those homes up, and they paid too much for them, and they're losing money on them, and they're sitting on them. So now they're selling them off to investors in big chunks that are going to turn them into rental units. But what it's doing is it's pulling those houses off the market for an extended period of time until they figure out what they're doing. So there's new players in the market. And of course, demand has risen across all geographies. It's not just a Wisconsin issue, it's all across the country. And it's really impacting first-time home buyers and those 55 years and older. I'll explain that next. So this is the traditional housing cycle, which is now broken. If you start, I don't know if I can, no, I can't, hold on. I don't think I can use a pointer. No. If you start on the left side, where you've got young person of household or group households, if you think about somebody coming out of college, they're renting an apartment, right? That's kind of that part there. You meet your significant other, now you move around to young couple at the top. That young couple then, moves into their first house. Maybe there's a room like what I did with my wife for 1 kid, and next thing you know, you have 2. So then you move to the next house for more room. You get the idea, right? And then at some point, your kids move away, and now you're an empty nester, and you want to downsize, and you move into a smaller house, which then frees up that house for the next family, and the whole cycle starts all over.
You left out the piece where they move back through and stop and drop off their cat and dog and move.
That's actually a really good point, and I'll come back to the moving back in part actually too, but yes. So what's happened in this country as a whole is we stopped making those entry-level homes, and we've also stopped making the empty nester homes. So if you're, as I'll just use it myself as an example, my kids haven't moved out yet, but they will soon, hopefully. We're in our house going, okay, once the kids move out, our bedroom's on the first floor, the washer and dryer's on the first floor, but we have an upstairs that we won't necessarily need. If we were looking to move out today, it wouldn't be cost effective for us. We bought our home 13 years ago at the bottom of the market. We got a low interest rate. I can't afford to move into a smaller home, which means now my home, which would be designed for the family of 4, is now not on the market. And there's empty space, so it's not being utilized properly. So there's that. And then because those entry-level homes aren't being built, then when your kids go off to college or whatever, they have no place to move. There's other impacts, of course, with the economy of those kids moving back home, so maybe that's somewhat of a good idea, but that's the cycle that's been broken on both ends, and it's kind of unraveling everything as a result. So this is from the Realtors Association. It's about 2 years old now, but you get the idea. And this is for Wisconsin. We had 75% fewer lots created and 55 fewer new housing units being constructed. And you can see the drop off. The blue are lots. The reddish orange are single-family building permits, and the green's the multifamily. So in 2018, it kind of dipped again, and then it took off again, and then this past summer, it dipped again. And the reason why it dipped this past summer is because of construction costs, and we'll come to that in just a second. This came out about a year ago as well. This was looking back how many units Wisconsin has underproduced. And this is just Wisconsin's 20 largest counties, but Dodge and Jefferson happen to make the list. And it shows that across the state, between 2006 and 2019, we underproduced a significant amount of homes, of about 20,628. The previous year, 2006 to 2017, it was 19,000. So every year, we're still underproducing homes to meet the demand. As I mentioned, one of the, we had a bunch of permits, then this past summer, things dropped again, and one of the reasons why is the rising construction costs. And if anybody was as silly as I was this summer to try to build something, it was not the summer to build something, that's for sure. So, there's been a severe labor shortage in the construction industry for a very long time, and we're starting to see that more now than ever. There's a belief that going into the trades is not a good career path, and that's not necessarily the case. Before COVID, 73% of Wisconsin construction firms had labor shortages. So this has only gotten worse with COVID. Increase in material prices, increase in site development costs, and then, of course, supply chain issues as a result of COVID and everything else. Lumber prices in the middle of this past summer were up 67% from the year before. So I bought 2x8 studs at the beginning of the summer for $2, and I bought them in the middle of the summer and they were $13, and they were from Menards, so there was the lowest quality you could possibly find, and there was still that much gap. So, and it's not just lumber. Drywall was up 7%. Copper, which is your wiring, was up 27%. So there was a lot that was impacting construction costs. So as a result, the builders pulled back, hoping that next year prices will drop. We'll see. The other thing that's impacting the cost of building homes, and again, it can be single-family or multifamily, is the rising cost of infrastructure costs relative to city infrastructure. So as an engineering firm, we do bid documents for our clients. So these are actual results from bid documents from around the state. We work for clients around the state to give you a cost for a typical 330-foot city street with sidewalk on one side, nothing fancy about it. And in 1998, it was $185 a linear foot. In 2020, it was $601 a linear foot for the same street. Why that's important is if you look at your zoning codes and you look at requirements for widths of lots, et cetera, you can see the difference. If you look at 2020, based on those costs, and you were to do a 330-foot long road and you had 100-foot lots, that's adding $30,000 more to the lot. If you have 50-foot wide lots, it's only $16,000, right? So, and again, that's assuming that the municipality is not paying for any of this, you're putting it on the development. And then you can see the difference between the infrastructure inflation rate versus the national inflation rate. So it's definitely gone up, and it's gonna go up again next summer already. We are doing bid documents, trying to do bids now. Typically, we'd be doing them in March. We're actually doing some now. We're doing some in January, and we're already hearing from firms to add another 5–10% increase.
Have you compiled that into a broad gauge book?
Into the future?
No.
No, yeah, but going back, yeah, I have all of this tabulated all the way back. Yeah.
Is that free to friends?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll give you my card afterwards.
Thank you.
Yep. And then other soft costs have impacted the housing as well. So lack of vision or policies within comprehensive plans, we'll come back and talk about that later. Eric will take that. Zoning being too restrictive, and then looking at different zoning elements affecting affordability. So your density, parking requirements, lot sizes, widths, things of that nature. Some communities have requirements, you have to have a walkout basement versus a slab. I'm dealing with that in a small community right now where they just don't understand why you would just put a house on a slab, and they don't want that. But then they don't understand why their house prices are so high. So there's ways that the industry is trying to cut costs, but then policymakers have a hard time understanding that. This is also where accessory dwelling units might come in as well.
We just, and if I may, this list on the right side of the screen, Alex and Jacob and I just met, I think maybe last week, and we talked about density, parking, lot width, and we are already pretty good on accessory dwelling units, but, so I feel good seeing those there.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good. You're ahead. That's awesome. So just, I want to throw out some examples really quick of what some of the communities are doing. What do they do? A lot of communities are trying to find housing developers. When the Great Recession hit, I was actually in Portland, Oregon, doing real estate development. And I was the chair of the Urban Land Institute's Oregon and Seattle chapter. And that was made up of builders, developers, that, you know, those, anybody in that world. In 3 weeks, we lost 75% of our membership between those two states due to bankruptcies. Not because they didn't want to write the check, there was nobody to write the check. That impacted the whole industry. I know a number of developers and builders that we work with at Cedar Corporation who used to do homes, they won't touch them. They've sworn they'll never go back. So we also have a shortage just of builders as well. So finding builders who will come into a community where they maybe not built before is a challenge. But what the housing developers are seeking is that proof that there's a demand for housing in a market, that a community knows what it desires, what it needs. Do they want single-family, multifamily? Do they understand the price points? They're looking for reduced or no land costs. They're looking for help with infrastructure, and land that is ready to go. So in the world of economic development, my world for the last 9 years, when you had industrial land and you wanted to attract companies, what did you do? You found land, you got utilities to it, you told the community, the world, what you wanted, and you attracted them. That's what communities are having to do now on housing. The exact same thing. There, to get those limited builders to come to your community, just like you were trying to get those limited businesses to come to your community. So it's the same thinking. But it's new for a lot of communities to understand that that's what needs to happen. The other thing I'll mention real quick is, in the world of site consultancy, it used to be you'd attract the business would attract the employees, and then the retail would follow the employees. That's not happening. Has not happened for 4 years, specifically not in the last year. Now what's happening is businesses are contacting communities, and site consultants are, and asking, how many employees do you have? What are your amenities? They're going to where the employees are, completely the other way around. So I just heard today of a story of a company who's leaving Phoenix and moving to the Midwest because they found a community that had a lot of people that got laid off from business that closed, and they're moving their whole operation there because the people were already there. Never heard of that in my career, so. So communities are doing a number of things. They're performing housing studies, which this region has done. They're creating public-private housing funds. Madison got together with a number of larger companies, and they created a workforce housing fund. They've raised a lot of money, and they're using those dollars to help offset costs to build workforce housing. Communities are identifying where housing should go and investing accordingly. So up in where I live in Eau Claire, and my office is out of Menominee, but both those communities have done master planning specifically around housing and identifying key sites that they want to attract development to. And then they're putting together packages, just like it was an industrial site, that can be sent and handed off to a builder when they walk in. Here's the utilities, here's the infrastructure, here's what's going to cost, here's our permitting process, et cetera. A lot of communities are waiving or reducing development fees. Updating zoning codes like we talked about, allowing mixed-use projects, smaller lots. Some communities are actually actively seeking corporate involvement to invest into their local housing projects. There's a community that has a large cheese manufacturer, and that company can't retain anybody because they move to town, they get offered the job, they go to find a house, there's no house, they're told it's going to take 6 months to get one built or longer, and then they leave. So that company is now thinking about actually building 2 12-plexes. So when they hire somebody, they can go there until the homes are built. So it gets back to company-owned homes, which is, the whole cycle again. So Gaining control of land is also becoming pretty popular now, and then taking the one-year TIF housing extension to fund housing within the community, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Let's see, how am I doing on time here? All right. So, in summary, local steps that local communities need to take, determining the market, what are your drivers, who's hiring, what's the salary range, understanding what types of housing you want. And again, it's not just affordable workforce market. Is it 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms? Is it apartments? Is it homes? Those types of things. Understanding your price point. Do you have land that is ready to go? What are your regulations, et cetera? Are you going to offer incentives or not? And then the key is gaining community support and the buy-in for the housing at those sites. And then compiling it into that concise marketing piece. So really quick, tools that are used for some of the workforce housing. And again, workforce housing is that gamut that we've been talking about. We go backwards. There's a number of them on here that can be used in different ways, and you can, what they call, build the capital stack by bringing different dollars in to make a project flow. The two most popular ones is tax increment financing, or TIF, if it's the right district, et cetera, and then low-income housing tax credits. Those are issued through WIDA, again, through the state. They're federal tax credits that work their way down, and that's to cover costs on the low-income housing scale. But you can do mixed development and use those credits to cover some of your costs as a result. And I'll quickly cover that just if you're not familiar with it. So they're also called LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits. It's a housing subsidy program, and basically it's a federal tax credit that investors purchase. So the way it works is a developer ties up land, because you have to have the land tied up in some form. Then they can go to the state through an application process, and if they're awarded a certain amount of credits. Those credits are then sold almost at face value, usually a little less than dollar for dollar value, to large institutional investors who need tax credits on their books to offset their gains. And that gives dollars then back to that housing project. And then that housing project has to remain affordable for X amount of years, depending on the credit program and how it's set up. But in essence, that's how it works. And then as a result, that project has income rent restrictions. And it's scaled depending on how many rooms, and you have to have certain bedrooms of different sizes, but the state makes sure that you're making a mix of salaries and a mix of unit types, 1, 2s, and 3 bedrooms. Last year, there was 3 times as many requests as there was credits. Very, very competitive program, and takes quite a while to get through. So quickly, if you have a $10,000 project and you go after the 9% credits, that's the math. You can generate, assuming you get the award, you can generate $9 million in credits that can go towards the project, and then the project only needs to get $1 million loan to make the rest of the deal work, and that helps keep the price down. If you didn't have the credits, you'd be borrowing obviously more money, and thus your prices would have to go higher. So, and we can talk more about this when we meet again in a couple of weeks during the brainstorming session. Dave with Moving Out will be here, and this is what he does. This is his expertise, is the tax credits. But just to give you a flavor of kind of how it works. And then just so you can see the kind of income limits that the state uses within Jefferson and Dodge counties. So it kind of tells you, again, for 4 people, if you're at 60% county median income of the $47,280, that means you're making $22.73 an hour for a family of 4. And then for rentals, these are the caps. So if you're in that 60% range, then the developer cannot charge more than the $1,230 for a 3-bedroom. So the feds and the state are looking at all those numbers we covered before and trying to figure out those percentages, and then they cap it for you. So that caps the profit, obviously, for the developer, which is why you need those tax credits to offset the costs. It also, if you have a TIF district, caps the value in your TIF district, because your value for your apartments is based on the rental rates. I always throw that out there as a caution, because some communities have given more money through TIF than they're going to get back in value because they forgot that their rental rates were capped. It's a very long process. If you get site control in August, for example, of 2022, you got to make sure the site's zoned properly. Then you apply for the tax credits in December. The tax credits, if you're lucky, are awarded the following year in March. Then you go through your whole building process, and you hope to be done in 2024. So that's a 2-year window. Or you can do what we did. We are working on a project with moving out in Rice Lake, where we did this, and we missed getting funded by 1 point. And we have to wait a whole year, and we're just getting ready to submit again, fingers crossed, that we make the round next time to do the project. So the communities own the building, so we have a letter of intent with them that we had to extend for 2 years in order to get the tax credits. But the community really wants affordable housing in the old hospital that they own. So the point of it is you got to be really patient. So. Tax increment financing, I'm not going to really dive into this too much unless there's questions about it. We can kind of understand how it works. I think you guys have TIF districts, so you generally got it, right? Okay, so I'm going to skip through this because of timing. And we can talk more about this during brainstorming if you want. I can do a quick refresher on it. But basically, once you've created that TIF district, you have a couple of different ways of funding projects. The community can bond up front, put it into infrastructure and hope the developer is coming, or, which most communities do now, since they tried to do that during the Great Recession, it didn't work really well, is you do pay-go, which means you tell the developer you're going to cover all the upfront costs, developer, and then once your project hits the tax rolls and you start paying your taxes, we'll give some of that back to you. That's pretty common now. But that still puts the burden on the developer to come up with that borrowing up front. But this does help. Or you can do a combination of the two. What I want to talk about was the state, you can do residential units in 2 types of TIF districts. A distressed TIF district, which is your typical downtown, and then a number of years ago, the state said you can do newly platted residential property in mixed-use TIF districts. So that's fairly new, but there's a bunch of requirements, and the most important one is the 35%. So if you have a TIF district that's 100 acres, only 35% of that can be for single-family residential units, new. So if you have somebody that comes in and says, I need help with infrastructure, I'd like to have a TIF district, and they've got 25 acres, you've got to have your TIF district 3 times that size so you can help them with their 25 acres. There's a number of us that have been trying to get Madison to move that number from 35 to 60, 50, and it gets killed every year. So we're going to try again next year. It's our 5th year. So that's a way to help using TIF. And again, you would be helping with infrastructure, land prep, land purchase, things of that nature if you fall within that. The other thing that happened a couple of years ago is they now allow communities to do the housing TIF extension. And I know, Mayor, have you taken advantage of that yet or had the opportunity to? I don't know if you're not. Okay. So if you have a TIF district that's about to close, or you have a TIF district that's paid off everything and there's a few years left, you can take 1 extra year as a housing extension. So if you have a 20-year TIF district, you can actually go 21 years. And that last year can be gathered all for affordable, for housing, only for housing. And it's a simple resolution that's passed at the city level. You don't have to go through your joint review board. You can do that only if all your debts and everything are paid off. You have to be, in the black. And then let's just, so we have a community that's, as a result of a really good industrial park, they're going to have $1 million, roughly. So we'll just keep it simple. So they're at the end of their lifespan, right before they actually close the TIF district, they file a resolution with the Department of Revenue and says we're going to take 1 extra year, boom, they get $1 million. 75% of it has to be used to benefit affordable housing anywhere in the city or the village. The remaining 25% can be used to improve housing stock of any type. The key is you can use 75% anywhere in the village. It does not have to stay within the TIF district. So what a lot of communities are doing is as their industrial park districts are getting close to being done, they're taking that last year and they're they're banking it. That's what Madison's doing, Milwaukee. But even communities with, I've got a community with 2,000 people in it. They're taking their $500,000 and they're going to use it to spearhead a workforce housing project somewhere in the community. And what they mean by affordable housing is housing that costs a household no more than 30% of their gross monthly income. That's that federal definition again. And that's the definition of household. So it's actually really good for communities that have a TIF district that's getting close to sunsetting. There is legislation out there right now in Madison to make that a 3-year extension. We'll see if that makes it past the anti-TIF folks. So kind of wrapping up my part here, I just want to give you an example. This is a project that Moving Out did in Stoughton. These are apartments designed to look like homes to fit into a neighborhood. It's an infill site. 33 units. 11 of those are targeted to families with someone with a permanent disability, and that's part of Moving Out's mission. And then just kind of shows you the capital stack. So they got a first mortgage. There's that 9% tax credit. They got a little over $400,000 in TIF. They got a discount on the land because the city actually owned the land. They got some state home funds, which is also used to help build affordable housing. And then it was a contaminated site, so they got a brownfield grant to clean up the site. So that just shows you how you can pull in the different dollars as an example. And again, Dave will dive in a little bit further in our next meeting that we meet at as need be. So there's one example. Another example, this is in Wisconsin Dells. These are what I would call the retire in place type of home. They're duplexes or attached homes, 0 threshold. They're built a little bit wider in the hallway so that as you get older, if all of a sudden you need a walker, you can still make it through. Bathrooms are a little bit bigger. But the idea here, these are the homes that have not been built for a long time in this country. My mother-in-law is a great example of this. She has had to move to different apartments as she's lost her mobility because she can't get through with a wheelchair. So if you could have a home or something like this where someone could stay until they're ready for something else, it would be better. So anyway, so this is 72 units, mixed income, so not just the low and affordable. 18 were targeted, again, to the permanent disability. They did the first mortgage. There's your 9% tax credits, their TIF. They got a second mortgage through WIDA. WIDA is also a lending organization besides the tax credits, state home funds, and they got some federal dollars. And then Moving Out, being a nonprofit, doesn't need a development fee. Most developers need a development fee, and I'll talk about that real quick here in a minute. But so they waived their development fee and put it back in the project to make the thing pencil. So they have large institutional investors that believe in what they do that covers their staff time. So, and a development fee, real quick, most developers need some sort of development fee, and typically they run between 6 to 12%, depending on what the project is, hotels or housing or whatever. And that fee covers all the effort that the developer had to put into it to get it ready to then get funding. So all their meetings, their travel, looking at sites, doing their pre-studies, things of that nature, that's what the development fee is for. And like I said, some developers will go less or more. Some developers will take the fee that they get and they'll put it right back into the project, depending on what's needed to make the project happen. So. All right, that was a lot. Sorry. You ready? Okay. I should ask, any questions on what I just covered? Okay.
Okay.
I'll come back up after Eric's done, so.
Very good. Thank you, Seth. As you can see, Seth has a wealth of knowledge about these details. I'm a little different breed. I'm a big picture kind of guy. Again, my name's Eric Fowle. I've been with Cedar Corp for just over a year, but prior to that, I spent nearly 30 years working for regional planning commissions, and the last 15 as the executive director of the East Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission up in Menasha and the Fox Cities. So I've worked with communities of all types on all numbers of issues, including housing, throughout my career. And you start thinking a little bit, they're kind of all the same. They're made up of the same pieces. It's just a different name, a little different layout. But there are unique things about each community. And I always like to start at the beginning and really talking about the community's comprehensive plan. Normally, I run some risk of offending the staff planners on this, but I know you haven't been here long enough. You didn't write the plan. So this guy I'll offend a little bit. But I like to start at the beginning just to kind of see what your plan says. Does it position you well to move forward on a number of projects and issues related to affordable workforce housing? Overall, I think it's a good plan in general. It's got a lot of good detail. It is about 2 years old, and as you can see, a lot of things have changed in 2 years, which is obviously why the state and planners often recommend you update them every 5 years, but really take a close look at them update them every 10 years, but take a close look at them every 5 years. You've got a great lofty vision. I did notice the word housing isn't in that vision anywhere. Not that it absolutely has to be, but I was hoping I'd see it somewhere else in the document, and that is the case. But, you know, to attract people using this vision, housing is going to need to be a component of that. The plan, as you know and understand, helps establish the vision for the community, contains some goals, objectives to achieve that, strategies, recommendations, other things to guide you, the council, the plan commission, other entities on meeting those visions, and should really clearly lay out the steps or the path forward on those things. I call it, you know, to some degree, some authorities. If you're planning on doing something down the road in the future, it should at least be alluded to in your comprehensive plan, sort of a CYA provision, if you will, that if you get questioned by the public, you can always default back, well, we talked about that in our plan, that was a public process. So it is very important when you're coming up with strategies moving forward on projects. So conducted a review of the entire document, focused on a number of the chapters as listed there, really taking a look at what's mentioned about housing. And you've got some things scattered in a few areas, but obviously Chapter 10 is the focus of that. Just a few quick facts, again, to put things in perspective. Using kind of the conservative estimate, you're looking at a projected growth over that about 20 years of maybe nearly 3,000, a need for about 2,400 housing units. That turns out to be about 100 per year. And if I remember looking at recent data, you've had about 15 new homes per year. So you're kind of off target there. Factor in the aging population trends as well. And the fact that millennials are now nationwide the largest age cohort out there, and they're just beginning their prime home buying years. So in addition to that competition that's out there, you've now got millennials competing with those who want to retire for the same houses that don't exist a great deal. You've got a lot of good statements in different chapters, different elements that speak to housing as part of the vision. It's not in the main one that I showed, but there are subsets that talk about supporting affordable workforce housing, fostering new dwellings, encouraging smaller residential lots, high quality design, traditional neighborhood development, a lot of different things that can go into affordable housing issues and design. You even mentioned a few specific sites within the plan, which is good. In terms of that. When you start getting into more details about objectives and policies, there's a little bit less. I don't have everything on here, but there's some mention within the land use section, some mention in the economic development section. I think that's critical, particularly now, of making that connection between economic development and affordable or workforce housing, making that connection that if your current employers want to maintain their level of business or expand, housing is going to be a critical component of that. You can't expand without having the roofs and the people within your community now. There's a number of strategies that also exist in the document, talking about strengthening existing neighborhoods, a desired mix of residential uses. The priority over 20 years is looking at some infill development, and you mentioned in the plan adopting small lot, single-family zoning and reducing the minimum lot size from 8,000 square feet. Also in those strategies, there's a number of sections that really talk about specifics of the type of housing that you want and where you want to put it. And I'm not going to read every bullet point here. You know these areas better than I do, but you've got areas targeted for single-family development. Doesn't say specifically affordable, just single-family. Two-family development in a number of areas, and multifamily development. And you identify a few places. The plan does note that a lot of those places were identified based on the type of development that existed at the time the plan was prepared. But then you've kind of got a bit of a conflicting statement talking about dispersing multifamily throughout the city. Not saying what's right, what's wrong, but that's something that you're going to have to make some decisions on. And again, with the typical stigmas that are associated, which many of are untrue, I think, as you know, this can be a challenge when citing multifamily development. So just to kind of paint a picture and sketched out those areas for single-family, duplex, multifamily, you can see the patterns there and where those are located, many within some services nearby. Also note the purple areas on the map there as planned mixed use. And I would challenge most planners in many communities to really define what you mean by mixed use. Your plan does a better job than most, but I guess in terms of accommodating affordable workforce housing within those areas, the question is how serious are you about implementing mixed use concepts and having them designed well so that they work. Always a challenge, and there's really not a lot of experience by Wisconsin planners for that kind of use unless you're really working in a large urban area. Quickly going to lot sizes. Did take a look at your zoning code as well, and was a little bit amazed in terms of the size of lots that are required. Certainly has a big connection to affordability of homes. The land costs a big chunk of money. Having the ability to have lower lot sizes, I think, is key and critical to reduce the overall sales price of a home and make it more affordable. Also taking a look at your minimum landscape surface ratio, or in many ordinances, things called a building coverage limitation. Many of them fall within maybe about 30 to 50% maximum building coverage. And so you really have, not that yards aren't a good thing, but I think it's time to reconsider whether or not those should be increased to allow for more building footprint on a single lot. For instance, you may be able to get a duplex on a site designed a little differently than a single family on the same lot size. Just to show you're not alone, been some data collected back in 2020 showing that since 2014 at least, we've been looking at decreases in single family lot sizes nationwide. The market is responding to this, probably started even a little before things started getting tight in the market, but a 21% reduction in median lot size, 40% reduction in average lot size. Now, some of those lot sizes are still fairly big to really deal with the issues that we have at hand. So, in a nutshell, I always like to kind of figure out what's missing, what's not talked about. What are things that maybe your community should consider talking about in that plan? And this can be done through a variety of methods and amendments and such. But there really isn't a lot of talk about the city's direct involvement and direct funding that it may decide to take out of the general budget, for instance, and put towards programs and things to help affordable housing. There's a little bit of talk about TIF and taking the one-year extension, some tax credits, but really not any more language about incentives. What is the city conceptually willing to offer up in terms of getting projects done that meet this need? One brief mention about business or community involvement in affordable housing. Employers, large employers, are being looked at more and more by communities as partners. They have needs for workers. They have needs for housing for the workers. So does the city. So how can you make those things beneficial? We talked about lot sizes, maybe introducing the concept of maximum lot size, maximum dwelling units and coverages. Restrictive covenants can put undue cost burdens on homeowners as well. Those can add up to a lot when you factor in that 30%. Parking requirements and other models, density bonuses, transfer of development rights, housing land trusts, taking the cost of the land out of the price for the buyer. But it comes with a caveat of getting buyers to understand you don't own the land underneath you. You just own the house. come resale time. But those have been more and more common. Not many in the state here that we're aware of, but something to consider. So I think overall, like I said, your comp plan is pretty good. It expresses a solid vision. Devil's in the details. I think there's some minor gaps that could be filled with some appropriate discussion on what's included in there to strengthen it. And then I always argue strength of implementation is key. Who is going to be the driver of the affordable workforce housing issue in the context of the comp plan? Is it the council? Is it plan commission? Is it your staff or an administrator? Do you create a task force? What's the best method to keep the conversation alive, keep things moving forward? Lastly, and I believe you're aware of this as well, but you've got a couple of good, very recent studies done on the housing market, housing situation in both counties, done by UW-Whitewater. I caution you, though, this is a lot of good and interesting data. A lot of it supports the issues that we've been talking about here and probably many others, but there are no strategies, there are no recommendations. It's not a blueprint for moving forward. It's a snapshot in time, which is very useful, obviously. So I think there's a lot of good things to work with in the city of Watertown in terms of what you've got already, but I'm a big fan of tweaking those things kind of at the highest level before you make a lot of steps towards more detailed strategies and actions that obviously typically cost money. So that's all I have to say with respect to the comp plan. I will hand it back over to Seth. I wasn't sure if you were wrapping things up. I thought about just plowing through it.
Yeah, you never know.
I need a drink.
All right. Oh, we're doing pretty good. All right, so next steps. So part of what the foundation's covering is to help you through this process. And so the next couple of things coming up, we're going to do a public education workshop on Saturday, December 4th, 10 a.m. Location we're still working on. And that is, we have a series of a little bit of education like we did tonight, but really hearing from the public through some brainstorm exercises, their thoughts about workforce housing, affordable housing, where it should go, things of that nature. We just did this in Jefferson, by the way. And then we want to come back to you for a council brainstorming session where we bring that information back, but we also want to do brainstorming with you as well, some of those same types of questions. And then we're going to take all that information plus the stuff that we've shared tonight and develop an action plan to help you with some more direction, kind of what you would have had out of a housing study. What are some recommended steps that you could take to move forward? So the other part of that is, and when I mentioned having sites ready for development, the foundation has also stepped up and will help identify 2 sites where we will actually create what's called a gold shovel site packet. So the state of Wisconsin has what's called certified sites for large industrial properties. It means those sites are ready for development. Then they came out a few years later with a scaled-down version called Gold Shovel, and basically it's a marketing tool. It talks about the sites, talks about utilities, talks about zoning, things that a developer would want to know about when they're looking for a site, and we will work with you to help identify what are the 2 best sites, and then we'll actually create those packets for you that you can use and put on your website and use to market. So those are the next steps and the dates. And be thinking between now and if you want to attend a public meeting or not, and the next time we meet for brainstorming, questions that you might have on what we've talked about tonight. I'll leave some business cards. If you've got specific questions, can they run through you, Alex? Feel free to send them to Alex and he can forward them on to me, and we'll try to, if we can't answer some between now and then, we will. If not, we'll be prepared when we meet again to answer them. And just kind of think about the information that was provided and kind of look at this as you do it. So,
Okay.
and that is an hour-and-a-half presentation in 55 minutes.
It was great, though.
We have all of this on paper, so we're
Yep,
going to
we're
give you
gonna
handouts. We'll make sure that staff has the digital version of this.
Are there any immediate questions for Seth or Eric?
Can I ask you just a quick question, Mayor?
Anyone except Mr. Bradley.
I'm just curious with the situation with inflation and kind of hyperinflation, and employers trying to keep up to that with compensation. We're seeing the average wages are going up to $15, $20 an hour. So that 60% of the threshold that you referenced earlier for the 4-bed or 4-person family, how are these families qualifying for these affordable housing with wages going up at such a rapid
Yeah, so it's a snapshot in time, and the state updates those numbers once a year.
Okay. So you should see an adjustment.
Those
on-
percentages,
Okay.
those 30 to 120%, that's updated at the state level by WIDA, and they use that as part of the tax credit program, and it gets updated every year. So that happens, but inflation sometimes is obviously going faster than that, so
Yeah.
that's a challenge.
So is that creating the displacement of residents right now, or no? Or they're just going to have to avoid compensation, I suppose?
Yeah, it's, I don't know, I think because of the way government looks at the program, it's a fixed in time, so there could be a missed opportunity for some folks as a result. And we'll see. And then the other issue is, you know, if that starts to slow down, but then those numbers are too high, you know, it goes either direction,
Right.
right? So it kind of flushes itself over time. The other thing I just want to mention real quick, if you do the math, even at $15 an hour, if you figure that all the way through and look at roughly what your taxes are going to be paid, you're still technically at 30%, it's only about $660 for a rent. So it's still tight. I don't know about the market here, but you can't find that in Eau Claire, I can tell you that. So it's still a challenge, unfortunately. So, okay?
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. Please, everybody just jot down that date that was listed in the materials for that brainstorming session. That's going to be the one that'll be pretty critical for us to be a part of. And again, the end result is a plan that would then come before governing body, we would vote on that, and then really that gives us foundation to operate off of going forward. So I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to stand up, use the restroom, get something to drink, so I'd love a motion to adjourn Committee of the Whole. By Mr. Wetzel, seconded by Wagner. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, we're adjourned, we'll see minutes. So thank you. Take a